Hey, welcome back. So we're going to pick up with part two of this presentation, which, as I said, should not take very long. I've just got a few more slides to get through here. But let's review since we're back here. We were talking about the two types of heroes' journeys, essentially. Talking about the fact that the journey must encompass external factors, which is what the hero may be seeking to gain from the journey, but also that it can be an internal journey as well. What are those things that the hero needs to overcome? Maybe what he needs to learn in order to be a better human being. What basic values does he still need to learn? Because it's all about the life's journey, right? It's that journey that takes us from birth to death, but more importantly, everything that happens in between that, right? Which is really the important stuff. So here are some characteristics of the classic epic hero. I do stress the word classic because this is mostly true of these older Grecian and Roman myths that we'll be covering. Obviously, as we get closer to more contemporary times, some of these will become passe. But for the most part, with these early stories, we're going to be dealing with a hero who, of course, is male. So you'll notice I use the pronoun he quite exclusively when referencing these epic hero stories. That's because the protagonist is almost always going to be male. With that said, it doesn't mean necessarily that this was a man's world in the ancient world. Not really so. There were some very, very powerful female figures, entities, goddesses who could and often did make life absolute hell for these epic heroes. They were often at the mercy of the females in their lives. So by no means are we saying that this was a man's world and women had no place in it. But as far as the stories go, the stories are almost always going to be dealing with a male protagonist. And that was just the nature of the way the world was at that time. Not only that, but he's going to be a male of noble birth because in the ancient world, they weren't interested in stories about ordinary people. You had to earn the right to be the star of your own story. And you earned that by being someone in an esteemed position. Not necessarily a king in every instance, but you had to have done something to have achieved some prominence. You had to have done something to achieve some level of greatness. So this is what we mean by the noble birth. Also, that brings us to the other point. Usually, the hero is at least half divine, meaning one parent may be a god or goddess. The hero is usually portrayed as half mortal. So we'll see, for example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, his mother is Ninsun, the wild cow, who is a fertility goddess in that culture. When we get to the story of the Aeneid, his mother is Venus, of course, the Roman goddess of love and fertility. And when we get to Sunyata, his mother is also Sigolum, who was considered the buffalo spirit. So this is, again, it's a very common trait of these epic hero stories. The hero may possess superhuman strength or magical ability, and of course, how does he get that magical ability? Because he has been descended from a parent who has a divine birthright. So he's been descended from a parent who is a god or goddess. However, because he's also half human, and this is where a lot of the conflict from the stories comes in, some of the best conflict. Because he's also half human, he may possess inherent human flaws. weaknesses of character. So the epic hero may do great things, but he isn't necessarily a great human being. And oftentimes that's the point of the stories, because he has to learn either to be a better human being or to at least fulfill his destiny, whatever that is. Now, let me explain a little bit about what this slide here is. It's not something you necessarily have to worry about right now, but since it's in this presentation, we'll go ahead and talk about it. So next week, we're going to start looking at least 2 episodes of a Netflix series called Myths and Monsters. It's a wonderful series. I've been using it for several years with this course. Usually in these first few weeks when we're starting to get comfortable with the idea of myth and defining what myth is. So as we watch that first episode next week, some things to be looking out for. Of course, we'll review defining myth and the purpose of myth, but we're also going to talk a lot about the contributions of Joseph Campbell to the study of mythology, some of his theories, which you'll be responsible for knowing at least a couple of those. We're going to talk about one of his concepts, which is the heroic journey, which we've already been talking a little bit about in this presentation, but we're going to delve even deeper into that. And of course, at that point, we're going to start talking more about the specific stages of the hero's journey, what happens in each of those stages. So all of that is just kind of up and coming, but some things to keep in mind. So for this week, though, I've given you this presentation with, again, some basic definitions and points to consider. I do have a short assessment quiz I'm going to ask you to do after this presentation. That will be part of your weekly online grade for this component of the course. And please feel free to reach out and contact me if you have any questions. All right, and I will see you all in class next Tuesday. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.